Hello and welcome to this week's Why Football podcast with me, Michael Dryden, and Etches Ajoglu. This week, we'll be talking all about Real Sociedad's history, how they're doing this season, and we'll discuss whether someone other than Barcelona or Real Madrid will win this season's La Liga. Before we start, please follow us on Twitter at YFootball_ for our latest content. Please also follow and subscribe with us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Acast, and YouTube for immediate access to future episodes. How are you, Etches?
Yeah, not too bad, mate. Pretty good actually. Some really exciting stuff coming up on the pod soon.
Very good.
Can't reveal what that is. Top secret.
No,
But yeah, but some big stuff coming up in the pod, which will be exciting. Aside from that, the same old usual, really. How are you doing?
I'm not bad. I want to ask your opinion actually on the penalty debate that has been going around following last week's match between Manchester United and West Brom. So the
Yep.
Bruno Fernandes penalty, where he obviously did his skip on the run up. Sam Johnson saved the initial penalty, and it was deemed that he came off his line, and the penalty was retaken. Now, I find this a bit odd, or not odd, but I find the rule a bit bizarre because obviously there's not much restriction there on what Bruno can do. But then Sam Johnson has come off his line, not too much. And it is the letter of the law that he can't come off his line, and it was right to retake the penalty. But do you think it's fair that Bruno Fernandes can do the skip and he can do kind of the staggered run up in whatever way he wants, but Johnson or any goalkeeper cannot budge before saving the penalty?
Yeah, I think the first problem is the way penalties are taken to begin with. So, to anyone listening and to you as well, Dryden, do you remember seeing the videos of those MLS penalties
Yeah,
where
yeah,
where
yeah,
they
yeah.
take it from the halfway line
Yeah, bring them
and
back.
they have to run around the keeper? Mate, I'd love to see that.
Brilliant. It's brilliant.
they're,
It's such entertainment.
they're so jokes. And the thing is, right, I think if you have a run up for a 1v1, you should really be bagging. And when they completely flop it, I find it quite funny. So yeah, bring back the MLS style penalties. If you haven't seen it, just type in MLS penalties on YouTube or MLS penalties from the 90s in YouTube and it will come up. It's so funny.
Well, I think now they probably will. I mean, when in the MLS when that happened, the pitches as well were dry, they were poor, and the
Mm.
ball was flying everywhere, bobbling up and like hitting off shins, flying off the bar. Now I just think the keeper would be getting lobbed every single time.
Yeah, but not if it's your centre back though.
Yeah. Why is
Seven.
Harry Maguire taking penalties?
That's a good question. No, but yeah, to the Sam Johnson debate, yeah, it is quite unfair that keepers can't come off their line because there's so many rules set for them. Yet, penalties. I know they stopped the stop. They allow the skip, but the actual stop and go
Yeah,
has been
yeah,
banned.
yeah. Because we had this
But
debate with Pogba, didn't we? We had the debate with Pogba and how he did a very staggered run up, which I always thought was just because everyone in the media seems to hate Pogba. But apart from that,
yeah,
um, yeah, they kind of tried to put a stop to players going too far in terms of staggered run up. But the Bruno Fernandes skip is a means of slowing down the final part of that run up, which is aimed in this. It has the same aim as a very
as the
staggered. Yeah, because
agreed,
they're just
agreed.
trying to see where the goalkeeper's going. And to be fair, I mean, ironically, Fernandes has missed quite a lot of penalties doing it this season. But I think Johnson actually tweeted afterwards. Someone had put about whether or not it was unfair that goalkeepers had these restrictions, and he said, "Well, at the very least, put the restriction on Fernandes as well."
Yeah, just do it like Power League, one step.
Yeah, what's one step?
What?
Yeah, Rabona's only. That's what I'll go for anyway. So let's dive straight in, Etches. Why this topic?
So I think this season in general has thrown up quite a few surprises. So even looking at the Premier League, we've got Spurs leading the way, which has made me quite
Yeah,
depressed on a
quite so.
day-to-day basis. City have looked out of sorts with teams like Villa dispatching Arsenal for fun, and fan favourite Sheffield United. They had overlapping centre backs and were doing all this sort of stuff. Are literally struggling now.
Yep.
Liverpool have been decimated with injuries, yet are still finding ways to win. You know, even though the season has been very different, some things remain the same. Arsenal struggling for form and consistency. Bring back Marouane Chamakh and his fantastic head of hair.
Why Shamak?
Um,
I just want
First
to
of all,
know your
he
logic.
had his hairstyle was just mad. He had the spiked up. When you're like 7 and you find gel for the first time.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I
That
was the
was
guy.
Shamax's. His hairstyle was awful. Yeah, he wasn't great. But for the bands, bring him back.
Oh, right. I thought you were implying he was implying that Arsenal's biggest flop over, say, the last, since the Invincibles. But obviously, other names spring to mind. Obviously, we've got Lord Bentner, who, he's a Lord for a reason. He's not really a flop, is he? But Ali Adier. And then Francis Jeffers is probably the biggest one.
I think in terms of, it depends what you define as flop. In terms of for money paid,
Yeah.
I would say for money paid, Mustafi's got to be up there. It's £35 million.
Mm.
Meant to German international World Cup winner.
Yeah, relatively though, Jeffers at that time, what was it 2001, 2002?
Yeah,
A million flop.
Jeff is up there.
But you're right. I mean, a flop. If it's a free transfer like Shamak was, I believe, then is it a flop because he comes in even if he plays a handful of games, there's no risk there. But
Yeah, I'd also have to throw in Pepe. My flatmate really hates Pepe, and I
mm,
know he's going to listen to the pods, and then he's going to have a go at me saying, "Oh, why did you not say Nicolas Pepe? He's rubbish." I don't think he's a flop yet. I'll give him time. I think he's very talented, but he could also be creeping on the list if he continues at the rate he's going at
there is
now.
there's a I think you said to me before. There's a resale value with Pepe as well, which you might not have had with Zaha. So I think
True.
that is you have to consider that. But still, I mean, you're looking at a flop. You've got to do a simple calculation of money spent plus games plus goals, and if that doesn't add up to much, then
Yeah, then you're a bit in trouble. But yeah, going over to Spain, it's been quite different there as well.
Mm,
Barca still seem to be hungover from the Messi saga, and they lie in 12th as we record this episode, albeit with 2 games in hand. Real Madrid lie in 4th, and Atletico in 2nd, with surprise leaders Real Sociedad top of the
mhm,
tree with 23 points after 10 games. After seeing them top, I kind of thought to myself, I don't know a great deal about the club or how they formed or what's gone well for them this season. So I thought I'd do a deep dive into them.
mm,
It's also worth giving a shout to my flatmate I mentioned earlier, Chesney, who forced my hand with the pod. Originally, I was going to do a podcast on something which had a lot of Spurs content. And
mm.
he's an Arsenal fan, so he threatened me with eviction.
Oh,
Uh,
right, right,
so
okay. Yeah,
yeah,
you gotta look out for yourself, Etches. No,
yeah. My hand was forced a little bit on that one, so yeah, I settled on Sociedad.
yeah, no, it's interesting. I mean, I remember Sociedad playing in the Champions League in the early 2000s. I think it was mid 2000s. I think they only spent maybe a season in Europe at that time. Around the time, I think Deportivo La Coruña were also in Europe, and everyone remembers Alaves and their foray in the Europa League and the UEFA
Yeah.
Cup, and they got beat off Liverpool in the final. But so it's interesting to see that those clubs aren't there anymore. And I think Sociedad were in that bracket, but obviously they seem to have come back in some form. And also must be aware that Liverpool legend Xabi Alonso was signed from their Real Sociedad. I think by Rafa Benitez, I assume. So yeah, I think that's the only links I really have or knowledge I have to date of Sociedad. So interesting to learn more. So Etches, who are Real Sociedad?
Yeah, so Real Sociedad's kind of came together back in 1904 when the San Sebastian Recreation Club was created by some students and workers returning from Britain. Kind of the following year, the San Sebastian Football Club was made as a separate branch from the Recreation Club. Then in 1909, there were complications over registration. So a new club was kind of entered there called Club Silistia de San Sebastian.
Mm.
Yeah, not bad pronunciation there. Out of confusion from that, Sociedad de Football was then formed in 1909. So you're beginning to see a quick pattern between 1904 and 1909 with multiple names flying around.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh, in 1910, the Spanish clubs played in 2 rival cup competitions, and Sociedad de Football was entered in the Copa UECF as Vasconia de San Sebastian. So another new name for the club. So yeah, another pattern in a quick 5 years. In the same year, King Alfonso XIII, who used San Sebastian as his summer capital, gave his club the patronage, where it subsequently became known as Real Sociedad de Football. So finally,
Ah,
after a fair few years, it settled on the name we know it as today.
yeah, it's always good to get support from the king, isn't it? When you're building a football club, but it's interesting to see as well that British influence there. I think you're referring to perhaps workers from Spain who went over to Britain and came back, or
Yeah,
vice versa. But there's still that kind of influence there, which you have at Bilbao, which is interesting to see two Basque clubs with that influence.
yeah, very much so. So Real Sociedad were one of the founding members of La Liga in 1929. Obviously, to many people, but if you don't know, they were blue and white and are nicknamed the Royals or the Blue and Whites.
Mm.
Very imaginative second nickname. Uh, I find that quite common with like European sides because in England you don't really call anyone. Do you call anyone like? Oh, you call people the Blues and stuff, don't you?
Yeah, it's
And the
quite common.
Reds.
Yeah, it's quite common to use colours because obviously that's the top Royals. I mean, we don't really have. Maybe isn't you don't really have. It's interesting. You don't,
Reading are the Royals, aren't they?
yeah, they are, but there isn't really an affiliation with the actual monarchy. Whereas actually in Spain, I mean, I don't know if that's just in Spain. You obviously have affiliations between seemingly their historical affiliation between Sociedad and King Alfonso, and then even now, and what has always been the case with Real Madrid and the actual monarchy in Spain. So
Very true, very true.
maybe that's why.
Anyway, Sociedad currently play their football in the Real Arena in San Sebastian, which has a capacity of around 39,000. Their arch rivals are Athletic Bilbao, who are also in the Basque region. Obviously, we know of Bilbao. They
Yeah,
have their famous recruitment policy for only selecting players that are native or have ties to the Basque region. Real Sociedad actually once had an even stricter recruitment policy, and in general, top football clubs in Spain place a great importance in developing
yeah.
their academy to promote players from within and then sell them as a source of revenue. And Sociedad were no exception to that. Until the late 1980s, the club operated on a strict Basque-only recruitment policy, but in order to remain competitive, they abandoned that. But their recruitment network is still heavily focused in the Gipuzkoa region, and they
Yeah.
have loads of agreements and in place with many clubs and schools, and are assisted by the regional governments to help aid their club's recruitment. Unlike Bilbao, Bilbao actually look at the whole Basque region. Sociedad specifically focus on that region I mentioned earlier, the Gipuzkoa,
Yeah.
which is seen not now because they've eased restrictions, but before that was their only source for talent in the region. The club have actually never played an official match without at least one player from that province, which
Stats.
is actual madness. They fielded an entire 11 of Gipuzkoan players for an incredible 295 matches, which is equivalent for 7 full seasons of games.
Absolutely mad.
There have only been 4 occasions when the club have named only one Gipuzkoan in their starting 11. That's mad. And while there have been, and there's been 596 games where there have been 10 Gipuzkoan players named the starting 11, and 598 games where there have been 9 included in the starting 11. That's up to date from November, so that's pretty
Yeah, I
solid
mean,
facts.
yeah, the stats are absolutely crazy. I mean, in the grand scheme of things, you can't imagine there's a particularly large pool to select from in that particular region. So the fact that they have solidly picked from that region for so long and have still retained some relative success over that time, or retained at least in La Liga, is just exceptional. And I mean, as you mentioned, Spanish clubs in general place a great emphasis on developing youth from within. We've seen that at clubs with the size of, like, say, Barcelona, obviously this Bilbao as well. But it's interesting how the Sociedad and Bilbao, despite having such restrictive recruitment policies, have still managed to retain at that level for so long. I mean, Bilbao have been in Europe. I mean, Sociedad have as well, as we discussed. So it's pretty crazy. I mean, I can't think of an example across Europe or the world that is akin to that, where not only you have that in place, but you have the team still doing, and the club still doing pretty well domestically and in Europe.
Yeah, I think the Germans are quite good with it as well. I think also to highlight as well for people listening is the Gipuzkoan region is only home to 700,000 people.
That's
So that
crazy.
that is up that's up to date as in I googled that about 2 hours ago. So that is
I doubt it's changed much. I think there's been a few babies born, but I don't think it's going to change too much.
And as I mentioned earlier, the relaxed recruitment policy that Sociedad have in place hasn't stopped them from producing some top talent over the years, where players like Xabi Alonso, formerly of Liverpool that you mentioned earlier, coming
Yep.
through their ranks, Alvaro Adriozola, who is now at Real
Mm.
Madrid and who was on loan at Bayern last season.
Oh,
Yeah, he originally moved to Madrid for 30 million euros. Inigo Martinez, who plays for fifth rivals Bilbao, moved in 2018 to 32 million. You got Azir Aliramendi, who is now back at Sociedad after a brief stint at Real Madrid. He was signed by Madrid for over £30 million. And also one tonight is Antoine Griezmann.
that's an
So,
interesting one.
so he was selected at youth level by Sociedad, despite having no ties to the Basque region or specifically the Gipuzkoa region, but was seen at a random football event and was, he was touted as a very key signing for them to make, and they brought him in at youth level, and obviously he was moved on to Atletico Madrid for about £24 million. So that's a really good way to mention how we've got 3 or 4 players that were from the region, Sociedad or sorry, Gipuzkoan or from that province through and through. And then you've got someone like Antoine Griezmann, which is showing the new way the rules work, where
Yeah,
they're willing
yeah,
to ease it for exceptional talents like him.
yeah. You'd probably think that going forwards, especially even with Bilbao, that they would relax if it became detrimental at all. It doesn't seem to have been detrimental at all to have that policy in place. But as football has moved on, and most nations and most clubs do import from overseas. So you'd imagine it would, relax over time. It's also interesting to think of like someone like Griezmann coming into that. And I think he's got ties to the Basque region anyway, so maybe this is not the case. But he's going through a youth system and growing up, people who are, from that region. It must have been quite difficult. It could have been quite difficult with not the same sort of level of ties that they might have had.
Yeah, he
In that.
originally lodged with their French scout when he first moved over, and
Mm,
yeah, it definitely would have been quite difficult for him. The players I mentioned before from the Basque region, or as I said, specifically could be from the Guipuscoan region, and he's coming from
yeah,
France, with no ties there, which could be quite difficult. So yeah, it would be very, very tough compared to maybe a club like Arsenal, where two guys have come from Barca at youth level, and you got a guy from Germany and a guy from Switzerland and a guy from Romania and a guy from, it's more of a
yeah, absolutely.
multicultural
Yeah.
environment.
So we're just moving on to matters with the first team. Who is the manager currently at Real Sociedad?
Yes, in the present day, they're managed by former academy coach Emmanuel Alguacil, who
Mm,
himself played for the club as a right back before having stints at Villarreal, Jaén, Cartagena, and Burgos. Once he
mm.
retired in 2011, he returned to Sociedad, being appointed manager of the youth setup. 2 years later, he was named as one of the other coaches of the reserve team, Azia Santana's assistant. He was also in charge of the main squad with Santana in November 2014 after Arsat, who was another coach there, was dismissed.
Yep.
When the king himself, David Moyes, arrived in 2014, Imanol was included in the first team staff, but he was appointed manager of the B side later that month. In 2018, they fired another manager, and he was at the helm until the end of that season. But he returned to the reserves as a guy called Azia Garitano took over the role as first team coach. But when he was dismissed following a poor sequence of results,
Yeah.
Emmanuel became first team coach. He did quite well. And at the end of the 2019, sorry, at the start of the 2019-2020 campaign, he was given a 1-year contract extension. So there he was, and that's how his role within the club changed and morphed very quickly over the years, and now he's at the helm. At the end of that 2019-2020 season, Sociedad came sixth in the league, which granted them qualification for the Europa League, and more importantly, they finished ahead of bitter rivals Bilbao, who
Mm.
came 11th. They also reached the Copa del Rey final, where they're set to play Bilbao in April 2021, as the 2020 final was
Oh
postponed due to
wow.
COVID. Yeah, you know what's mad about this, right? So when I first read it, as a postponed due to COVID. Apparently, it's an agreement by both of the clubs to postpone it because they wanted fans there. So it was kind of seen as, yeah, there was COVID involved, but they kind of wanted it played with
So
their
so
fans
what?
present.
So they've postponed it to April 2021. So is the Copa del Rey actually going ahead this season, or have they just put the final back by a year? Or are they
Yeah,
playing two finals?
I believe the Copa del Rey is still going on this year.
So they're going to have two finals at the end of the year.
Yeah, I believe so.
that's, that's
I'm
mad.
pretty I'm pretty sure. I'm pretty sure the Copa del Rey is like still going on. Um, actually, yeah,
Yeah,
Copa
it
del Rey
is.
is still going
Definitely
on.
is.
It definitely is. Yeah, so yeah, they're gonna have two finals, I assume. Yeah, they must do because I know for sure. Yeah, they're basically postponed to 2020. So yeah, you have two finals, mate. Bish bash bosh.
Yeah, fair. Both teams in the same final.
Yeah, I don't know when the 2021 final is now going to be. I just know that the 2020 final is going to be played in April. Maybe that's why it's in April
Yeah.
because they need it before the actual final, which would be in May. Um, or I assume May because that's similar to the FA Cup. But yeah, the Copa del Rey, yeah, that is quite. Yeah, so I didn't think about that actually. Yeah, two finals in 1 year. Yeah, fair.
Out of that brief history of Real Sociedad, Etches, I believe you failed to mention club legend Chris Coleman and his stint between July 2007 and January 2008. I say club legend based on that brief stint. I think you can see that that wasn't overly successful. That was when they were in the Segunda League, the second division of
Yeah,
Spanish football. But he was recommended by, I was doing a bit, as you can tell, I've been doing a bit of research on my own. He was recommended by John Toshak, who actually had 3 stints as Sociedad manager over his times, winning the Copa del Rey actually in one of those spells. Um, and also, if anyone has any spare time, and this time would have to be incredibly spare, very spare, I'd recommend checking out the list of John Toshak's managerial career. It spans about 30 clubs. But it's interesting to see how Toshak's had some influence there. Brought in Coleman, who didn't do too well, and then Moyes as well came in and we saw what happened there.
Do you know who will have some spare time on their hands? Phil and his dog, mate.
Phil and his dog. Well, if you're listening, Phil.
Yeah, so now the Copa del Rey final was suspended. The top scorer in the league for them last season was Willian Jose, who was linked to the move to Spurs. People remember when Harry Kane picked up an injury and
Yeah,
half the
yeah.
country was in mourning because they're worried about the Euros. The talented Alexander Isaac was top scorer in all comps with 16. He was also the top scorer in the Copa del Rey with 7 to his name.
Yeah, Isaac was at Borussia Dortmund. Interestingly, I mean, they obviously love bringing through young talent, and we've seen that with obviously Bellingham being there, Sancho, Haaland, and it's interesting to see Isaac didn't meet the cut there basically, unless that was because Haaland coming in had to ship someone out. But he's done seemingly quite well at Sociedad.
Yeah, he's still very young. He's only 21, so he's got a lot of time on his side.
So, Etches, what's been key to their success this season?
Yeah, I think going into the 2021 season, Sociedad had a stat where they had the most youth prospects from their academy in the first team, which, is testament to their focus on their academy, even though their rules have slightly relaxed. The specific number was actually 16 players,
Bloody
which is
hell.
a ridiculous number. The main challenge of the summer was to replace key performer Martin Odegaard, who departed back to parent club Real Madrid. This wasn't actually planned, with Monreal revealing in an interview he was promised he would stay.
Oh, God.
So
You played up.
obviously, yeah. Can you
Oh,
imagine? Where's Odegaard?
where's Martin? Yeah, it's like Torreira when he signed for Athletic. I don't know if this is pure speculation. I read it in the press, but apparently he was promised that Partey would stay, and then he obviously didn't. And I think it was actually unbeknown to Simeone, and he wanted Partey to stay, and then obviously Torreira joined anyway. And also, Odegaard is only 21, which feels mad. I mean, he joined Real, what was he, like 16, 15? But, I mean, he's been around forever, seemingly.
Yeah, but Pai was just joining a bigger club, so that's probably
It was, yeah. Apologies.
yeah. To replace Odegaard, though, they managed to replace him with a veteran City midfielder David Silva at the
Mhm.
11th hour with Lazio, who were left fuming as they believed they'd signed the player. Obviously, David Silva joined Sociedad, and Lazio went on to say they respected Silva as a player, but no longer as a man. That is a
Why?
shot. That is a shot
It's
and a
just
half.
it's a shot, but it's so relevant. Like, what is? I don't think Silva's going to lose any sleep. It's not as if like he's now being blocked from a future move.
In terms of outgoings, Leeds fans will know David Llorente well, who joined them this summer from Sociedad. I think the success, seems to stem from a solid backline, which has only conceded 4 goals in 10 games.
Wow.
Then they have, an array of talented attackers at their disposal to unlock defenses. It's kind of hard to pinpoint their main so-called star, but Mikel Oyarzabal has been seen as a key performer from them. He's a Spanish international, top scorer for them in the league and the whole of La Liga with 6
Yep.
goals. He's been heavily linked to City in the past and was also hunted by Bilbao in his youth days. Marco Marino is seen as an underrated star in their ranks. He enjoyed a difficult spell at Newcastle and Borussia Dortmund, but has bounced back fantastically at Sociedad and is now on the international scene as a result for Spain. We mentioned David Silva, of course, with his quality and experience, helping guide a fairly young team.
God, what a capture that is. I mean, I know he's an aging player, but I mean, he's an exceptional player, and it seems to be. I mean, we don't know, but it seems to be. When I watch City this season, I almost seem to think that that's what they're missing: the David Silva link between midfield and attack. And I know Bernardo Silva's been injured, and Foden seems to be coming in and fitting in that mold. But I can't help but kind of draw comparisons between this season and last. And the key kind of the common denominator who's not there is David Silva.
Yeah, I agree with that one. I think that's pretty fair point. Other players have helped Sociedad's cause have been La Cabra, aka the Goat, one of my favorite Arsenal players in recent years. Nacho Monreal has added experience for them in defence. That, coupled with additional attacking talents like Porto, Willian Jose, Adnan Januzaj, one of your favorite players, and Alexander Isaac. So you can kind of see how their varied attack with a strong defence has led to a team that's currently flourishing.
Yeah, I still have Januzaj posters on my wall actually in my bedroom. But yeah, so he played for Sunderland he was on loan for a season. I think it was the season we got relegated. So enough said about that. But finally, we might be seeing Januzaj come of age. I mean, obviously he was at United, came through so young. He always seems to have that gift and that potential, but perhaps not enough to perhaps make it as a club the size of United. And also for the last so many years, I think he was brought through around this Moyes time or just after, and that was a very difficult time to come through at United. We saw a number of players not flourish in that time. So hopefully we're seeing Januzaj come of age.
Yeah, so to kind of to round things off, Sociedad at the top of the league. It's only 10 games in, and a lot of teams around them have games in hand. But is this the season where Barca and Real's hold of the top is broken? It's been a long time since neither Barca or Real won the title. The last time was 2013, 2014, when Atleti won it under Simeone. And before that is 2004, which is
crazy.
So long ago, when Valencia won it. I mentioned earlier that Barca have 2 games in hand, and that could see them shoot up the table. But neither, them or Madrid have particularly stood out this season. And you would imagine those clubs in particular will eventually make the gap up, and maybe Sociedad will fall away. But one team which I think could break it is Atletico Madrid. So João Felix is a guy I heard loads about. Watched him last season for Atletico a few times in the Champions League. He didn't specifically sparkle when I watched him. I can't proclaim to watch every single Atleti game. But this season, he seems to have turned a corner with that Suarez combination. I think he's come more centrally this season from what I've seen, and has been a devastating effect. He's been quite good from the Champions League games I've seen him in, as well as a few La Liga games. And hopefully they can kind of break the hold that Barca and Real Madrid have, because it's just not fun. Like, it's as a bookie in Spain, it's just like a foregone conclusion nearly, because it's just boring to see the same teams win it again and again and again. Even Atletico winning it, they're the last team to do it. It'd be nice to see another side kind of contend and break that hold, but who knows?
I think Real haven't perhaps looked the same since the departure of Ronaldo, and I suppose they've came from such a purple patch in terms of trophies. So, I mean, obviously the decade just gone was a decade of success for Real Madrid, and they won, 4 out of 5 Real Champions League titles within, I think it was between 2014 2019 or something like that. And that is a significant achievement to make. And you've got players within that ranks and players who are part of that team, such as Modric and Kroos and Marcelo and Benzema, and are no longer as young as they used to be. I do wonder if Real Madrid are in that kind of transition period. We saw Bale leave. Obviously, that saga was something they want to get put behind them. But we saw Bale leave. Hazard's come in and perhaps hasn't hit the ground running. So I do wonder if Real are in transition. And then, as you said, I wonder if Barca are still kind of not over the Messi situation. You've got the issue with the president in play there. And I do wonder just generally with Real and Barca, they come now struggling to come to terms now with what could be the end of the Messi Ronaldo era for both clubs. And I mean, I know Ronaldo's now left Real, and we're seeing that more, but it could happen at Barcelona now where Messi leaves, and they have to come through that spell of that fallout of having such an icon at the club then leave. And let's not forget as well, Barcelona over the last 5 years have spent, they spent a lot of money on players like Coutinho, Ousmane Dembele, Griezmann, who haven't necessarily lived up to particularly Coutinho, have not lived up to the hype or to the price tag, perhaps more is more better way of phrasing that.
Yeah, I think your point on Barcelona about the Messi hangover, they've tried to hit it, and they've tried to adjust it. They spent 1 billion since 2014, 2015 season. And it's just gone terribly wrong. And I think the hangover from when he does leave, because he's from the academy, will be a really protracted out saga.
So that's all from us this week. Thank you all for tuning in. Thank you to Itches for doing the research once again on Real Sociedad. Very brilliant insights. Don't forget to subscribe with us on all our channels, including Acast, Spotify, Apple Podcast, and the like, and YouTube as well. So thank you guys. See you next week.
Cheers, guys.